Hey guys, tonight we slip into the humid air of a morning on the Nile. The mist is rising in slow ribbons, curling and fading as the first rays of sun hit the water. You can almost smell that mix of damp earth, reeds, and river mud. It clings to your nose in a way that makes you think maybe you should have slept in, but of course, you didn't. You're here, dragging yourself out of bed because laundry doesn't wait, not even in ancient Egypt. You tug on a rough linen wrap, still crinkled from yesterday's use, and step outside where other households are already stirring. You hear the low murmur of conversations and the shuffle of sandals across packed earth. Somewhere nearby, a rooster squawks with the confidence of a creature that has absolutely no idea it will eventually end up in a stew. Now, a quick reality check. If you were really here, you probably wouldn't last more than a couple of days. Between the heat, the constant labor, and the sheer amount of dust that seems determined to live inside your lungs, you'd be begging for an air-conditioned laundromat. But let's pretend you're tougher than you look. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And if you want to make me smile, let me know in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is right now. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You stretch, squinting at the golden horizon. The Nile glimmers like a stretched-out mirror, a thin layer of fog making it seem unreal, like the whole river is holding its breath. Women are already moving purposefully, carrying woven baskets of tangled linen. They balance them with the kind of practice that makes you envious. Your modern grocery bags never quite sit right, and here they are, walking miles with laundry on their heads like it's no big deal. Children dart around, chasing each other, some already clutching little clay pots. You catch a whiff of burning wood as someone rekindles last night's cooking fire, the smoke rising in thin trails. A donkey brays in protest at having been woken up, which, to be fair, you can relate to. As you walk, you feel the Nile's cool breeze against your face. Even though the day will become unbearably hot, mornings like this are oddly fresh. Your bare feet scuff through patches of dust, reminding you that laundry isn't just about dirt and sweat, it's about sand, lots of it, creeping into every fiber. Historians still argue whether Egyptians viewed sand as a constant nuisance or simply part of life, but considering you've already shaken it out of your bedding twice this morning, you lean toward nuisance. You adjust the bundle of clothes under your arm. The fabric is stiff, carrying the faint sour tang of sweat from the previous day's labor. Some pieces are light, plain, the kind worn by farmers. Others glimmer faintly with dyed edges, someone's better tunic, worn to the temple and now just as dirty as the rest. The thing about Egyptian linen is that it's surprisingly soft once washed and beaten, but until then, it's like dragging around a bundle of crunchy paper. One woman passes you, muttering about the weight of her basket. She flashes a smile though, because complaining about laundry is apparently timeless. You chuckle quietly and continue on, your own load not much lighter. As you trudge toward the riverbank, your eyes catch details you hadn't noticed before, small shrines at doorways, painted with protective symbols, a cat perched lazily on a mud brick wall, watching with half-lidded disdain, the steady, rhythmic clink of someone sharpening a tool. It's all happening around you, but for now, all anyone cares about is linen. By the time you reach the banks, the mist has thinned, replaced by a sharper brightness. The Nile is alive with movement, fishermen untangling nets, children skipping stones, women chatting as they set down their baskets. Laundry day isn't just work, it's an event. You're part of a tide of people, everyone hauling cloth, jars, and stories. And as you pause there, breathing in that earthy smell of water and reeds, you realize, this is the beginning of a cycle. The same one yesterday, the same one tomorrow. Laundry never ends, not even when pharaohs build pyramids or priests chant in temples. You glance down at your load and sigh, not with dread, but with a kind of resigned humor. At least you're not the only one. You hoist the clay jars onto your shoulder, feeling their familiar weight press against your side. The Nile shimmers beneath the rising sun, reflecting gold that almost hurts your eyes if you stare too long. As you trudge along the riverbank, you notice the soft squish of mud beneath your sandals and the occasional hiss of water snaking around stones. Somewhere upstream, a crocodile slides silently into the water, a subtle reminder that nature here is never just scenery. You try not to think about it too much, focus on balancing your jars instead. Passing other villagers, you exchange polite nods and murmured greetings. Some women carry smaller bundles of linen while toddlers cling to their skirts, determined to be part of the morning's chaos. A boy almost trips on a protruding root, and you can't help but chuckle. Childhood is the same everywhere, you realize, even across millennia. The clay jars are surprisingly unwieldy, and you shift the grip on your shoulder to avoid straining your neck. The water inside sloshes gently, as if reminding you of the work to come. You watch another neighbor scoop water from the Nile, dipping the jar into the current and letting it fill with the silty mix. The water is cool but not entirely clean, tiny flecks of sand float lazily across the surface. Historians still argue whether the Egyptians considered this ordinary or a minor nuisance, but in practical terms, you'd probably add extra rinsing anyway. You pause to observe a peculiar scene, a man balancing two jars on a shoulder pole, humming a tune while a child mirrors him with a tiny cup. It's oddly hypnotic, the way rhythm and repetition create a sense of harmony. You find yourself stepping in time, almost involuntarily. This is one of those moments where ordinary tasks blend with art, even if nobody would call it that. Finally, you lower your jars to the riverbank, feeling the gentle vibration of water against your palms. The clay is cool now, slightly slippery from damp hands. You dip one jar, then another, letting the current help carry the liquid inside. A light breeze lifts your hair and brings the scent of river reeds and lotus blossoms. You take a deep breath, savoring the small luxury of this morning ritual. Nearby, someone laughs at a joke that you only half hear, something about a goat and a stubborn basket. You smile quietly, appreciating the timeless humor. Laundry is hard work, yes, but it also anchors daily life in a way that feels soothing. You set the jars down and watch others bend and scoop, the gentle splashes echoing softly along the riverbank. As you prepare to fill your own basket with river water, you notice tiny details. A dragonfly hovering over the surface, reeds bending slightly in the current, a fish breaking the water for just a second. It's the kind of observation you never notice in modern life, rushing between meetings or emails. Here, the world is slower, deliberate, almost meditative. You lift your first jar and pour it carefully into your basket, feeling the warm Nile sediment clinging to your fingers. Between scoops, you wipe your brow, remembering that this water isn't just for washing clothes, it's for the entire household. You'll use it for rinsing, scrubbing, and even occasional perfuming later. Some of the wealthier neighbors might add oils or aromatics, but most of the water will do its job quietly, cleansing the fabric in a way that is both functional and almost ritualistic. You glance back along the riverbank and see a line of villagers, each absorbed in their own work. You notice subtle competitions: who can fill their jar fastest, who has the smoothest technique, who manages not to splash their neighbor. There's a rhythm to it, almost musical, with the swish of water and the soft clink of clay on stone. And as you continue fetching water, your mind drifts to questions historians still debate. Did ancient Egyptians see river chores as purely practical, or did they imbue them with symbolic meaning tied to life and purification? You can't answer, but you enjoy letting the thought hover, just like the mist that had blanketed the Nile hours earlier. For now, all that matters is the steady motion of lifting, pouring, and balancing, a gentle, meditative prelude to the laundry that awaits. The clay jars are empty now, and you set them down on the riverbank, taking a moment to appreciate the cool relief of holding nothing for a second. You watch as other villagers begin preparing the soap mixture, and it strikes you just how inventive these people are with such simple materials. Natron, clay, and ash, ingredients that sound more like a spell than detergent, combine into a gritty paste that promises to wrest dirt from your linens. You scoop some into your own small bowl, feeling the rough texture scrape gently against your palms. The scent is earthy, slightly sharp, and reminds you faintly of damp soil after rain. You smear a little between your fingers and paws, noting how the paste clings to your skin. This is the first magical step in transforming yesterday's sweat-stiffened tunics into fresh, soft garments. Historians still argue whether Egyptians ever fully grasped the chemical properties of natron, or if they relied on trial and error, ritual, and a dash of intuition. Either way, it works remarkably well. A neighbor shows you a trick, a circular motion with your hands, almost like massaging the fabric. You follow along, feeling linen fibers slowly loosen and release their stubborn grime. There's a meditative quality to the action, the repetitive rubbing, the feel of the gritty paste between your fingers, and the faint aroma that hangs in the warm morning air. You realize that washing clothes is not just chore, it's a kind of tactile storytelling, each stain, each crease, a memory being erased and transformed. Nearby, a child giggles as they drop a dab of ash into the river by accident, watching a tiny swirl of cloudy sediment drift away. You smile, remembering how even the smallest participants add unexpected chaos to the process. And yet, there's method here. Certain fabrics receive more natron than others, some pieces are folded and kneaded with care, and some require repeated attention until they reach the desired softness. You pause and notice an odd detail. Some households sprinkle a little powdered resin into the mixture, presumably to add a subtle scent. You wonder if it's a practical experiment or simply a quirky tradition passed down through generations. Either way, the fabric takes on a faint, pleasant aroma once rinsed. You wonder, lightly, whether Pharaoh himself ever noticed the scent of his robes, or if that was left to servants' imaginations. Scrubbing the fabrics is hard work, but you find comfort in its rhythm. One piece after another, you rub and fold, knead and rinse. A soft breeze carries the sound of distant drums and clinking pottery, blending into the gentle music of morning labor. You try not to splash your neighbor, though the effort is mostly in vain. A tiny splash lands on your forearm, and you laugh quietly. It's moments like these that remind you how human and shared even mundane work can be. You pause briefly to wipe sweat from your forehead and admire the variations in color between fabrics. Some are dull and coarse, perfect for daily wear, while others shimmer faintly with subtle dyes or stripes. You think about how careful Egyptians were in preserving color and texture, and how much pride went into presenting even everyday clothing. Historians still argue whether these choices reflected status, personal preference, or something closer to ritualistic significance, but you like imagining each color telling its own story. As you work, your thoughts drift to the peculiarities of ancient laundering, ashes that scratch gently, natural soaps that foam in tiny, almost imperceptible bubbles, and the endless patience required to treat each piece individually. There's a tactile poetry in it, the juxtaposition of dirt and cleanliness, effort and satisfaction. You realize that this labor, though mundane, carries a quiet dignity, a kind of understated artistry. A bird calls from a nearby reed patch, and you glance up to see a kingfisher diving into the water. It startles you, but you can't help smiling at the perfect timing. Life continues in its small, gentle rhythms, washing, observing, chatting, laughing, and pausing just enough to notice little wonders in the world. You take another scoop of natron paste, feeling the tiny granules press against your fingers, and prepare for the next piece of linen. The day is still young, and you're just getting into the meditative groove of it all, imagining the smooth, clean result waiting at the end. You lift the first dampened tunic from the basket, letting the weight of the wet linen settle into your hands. Its fibers are heavy and stubborn, clinging to themselves as if reluctant to be cleaned. You stretch it over a smooth, flat stone by the riverbank, the sun already warming the surface just enough to make the fabric pliable. The gentle heat will aid in softening it, and you appreciate the simple logic behind it. A neighbor passes by, nodding approvingly at your technique, and you feel a faint sense of camaraderie. There's something quietly comforting about shared labor. The process begins with gentle kneading, your thumbs pressing against stubborn stains, your fingers coaxing the fabric to loosen. You can't help but notice how different the weave of each tunic feels. Some are rough, utilitarian, meant for fieldwork and hauling, while others are slightly finer, reserved for indoor use or for members of the household who get the rare luxury of comfort. Historians still argue whether Egyptians consciously varied fabrics according to social hierarchy or if it evolved naturally based on materials and availability. Either way, your hands become attuned to the nuances of each piece. A little boy toddles near the river's edge, balancing on stones as he attempts to mimic your motions. You chuckle quietly, wondering whether he understands the purpose or if it's all just a playful game. Small splashes accompany his wobbly steps, and the sound blends with the gentle lapping of water against the bank. Occasionally, you feel a splash yourself, and it elicits a soft laugh that you tuck away, adding to the sleepy rhythm of the morning. As you knead and rub, you become aware of the smell, the mixture of natron, wet linen, sun-warmed clay, and distant reeds. It is earthy, slightly tangy, and profoundly grounding. You pause to inhale deeply, realizing that scent is one of those subtle details modern life rarely affords. Laundry is not only a chore here, it's an immersive sensory experience, where the body, mind, and environment converge. You notice a curious practice nearby. Some women roll the fabric into tight cylinders before kneading, claiming it helps lift stains more efficiently. Others spread the linen over reeds or flat stones, letting sunlight and airflow complement the scrubbing. You decide to try both methods, noting the subtle differences. There's a rhythm to this, a dance of touch, water, and heat, where even slight variations matter. While working, you overhear a neighbor explaining a more unusual technique. Occasionally, they add crushed petals or herbs to the washing mixture. The aromatic addition supposedly refreshes the linen, leaving it subtly scented. You imagine yourself in modern times, tossing flowers into a washing machine just for a faint perfume. It seems whimsical, yet here it fits seamlessly into the routine. A sudden ripple on the river distracts you for a moment. Tiny fish dart beneath the surface, their movement reflected in sunlight like flickering threads of silver. You pause to watch, realizing that the natural world continues its quiet patterns as you labor. The occasional bird calls, a reed bends with the wind, and children's laughter echoes in soft bursts. There's a subtle poetry in this, one that makes you forget, briefly, that this is work. The fabric begins to soften under your diligent care. Each fold, rub, and press transforms it gradually, almost imperceptibly, from stiff and soiled to yielding and clean. You find yourself slipping into a meditative state, your mind wandering over minor thoughts, the texture, the warmth, the sound of water, and the faint tang of natron on your fingers. You notice how repetitive actions like this, so mundane yet so precise, can lull you into a kind of gentle trance. Occasionally, you glance up at other households along the river, noting how each has developed its own subtle techniques. Some scrub more vigorously, some fold more carefully, and some even sing soft melodies to keep pace. Historians still argue whether these were conscious rituals or simply organic habits that emerged over time. Whatever the origin, you appreciate the unspoken coordination of effort, the communal pulse of daily life. By mid-morning, your arms ache slightly, but the satisfaction of seeing a tunic respond to your care makes it worthwhile. The first piece now lies stretched and sun-warmed on the stones, noticeably cleaner and softer. You let out a quiet sigh of accomplishment and reach for the next garment, your hands already falling into the steady rhythm. The river, the stones, the sunlight, and the tactile labor blend into a single, gentle current of awareness. You pick up the next tunic, its fabric heavier than the last, and feel the stubborn stiffness resisting your gentle coaxing. You dip it in the river, letting the water seep deep into the fibers, and marvel at how different the same type of linen can feel depending on its age, wear, and prior use. The current tugs slightly at your wrists, and you adjust your stance, feeling grounded in the soft mud beneath your sandals. Historians still argue whether Egyptians ever understood how water temperature subtly affected cleaning outcomes, or if it was purely empirical experimentation passed down through generations. As you begin rubbing the fabric with the natron mixture, a nearby woman demonstrates a quirky method. She lightly taps the cloth against a flat stone, producing a rhythmic, almost percussive sound. The effect is subtle. The motion helps lift embedded dirt while creating a soothing cadence, like a muted drumline accompanying the labor. You mimic the technique, surprised at how effective it is, and can't help smiling at the small absurdity of learning music while doing laundry. The aroma around you shifts with each dunking and kneading. The earthy smell of clay mingles with the sharp, almost citrusy tang of natron. You breathe it in, finding it oddly comforting. There's a tactile satisfaction in the process, too, the friction of roughened fibers, the subtle resistance of wet linen against your hands, the occasional slosh of cool water over your wrists. You remind yourself that these seemingly mundane actions are deeply immersive, requiring attention to texture, temperature, and timing. Nearby, a child drops a handful of crushed reeds into the water, giggling at the tiny swirl of debris. You chuckle quietly, gently flicking some water toward them in mock retaliation. Moments like this, fleeting and small, highlight the human side of chores, laughter interwoven with work, unexpected interruptions that add color to a routine task. You realize that the riverbank is more than a workplace, it's a communal stage where daily life unfolds in soft, unpredictable rhythms. A neighbor leans over to show a peculiar tip, sprinkling a small pinch of powdered resin onto the damp fabric before kneading. The resin supposedly adds a subtle scent and may even help preserve the linen's quality. You try it cautiously, noticing how the faint aroma lingers without overpowering the natural smell of sun-warmed fabric. You wonder if Pharaoh ever noticed the subtle differences in scent between household laundry, or if it was simply a servant's small luxury, invisible to the elite eyes above. The rhythmic movements, the sun warming your back, and the soft lapping of water around your feet start to blur the edges of time. You feel yourself sinking into a gentle, almost hypnotic state, where the mind focuses on sensation rather than thought. You notice how the variety of techniques, rubbing, kneading, tapping, offers subtle mental stimulation, keeping the task engaging even as it soothes. A soft breeze carries the scent of papyrus and distant flowers. You pause to inhale, letting the mixture of natural aromas, tactile labor, and gentle sunlight fill your senses. The tunic responds gradually to your care, fibers softening under repeated attention. Each fold you knead and flatten seems to whisper that the labor itself is part of the reward. Historians still argue whether ancient Egyptians regarded laundry purely as necessity or if, for some, it carried a quasi-ritualistic satisfaction akin to meditation. You notice how the river's flow changes slightly in rhythm with the wind, and small fish dart beneath the surface, reflecting sunlight like liquid sparks. You pause for a moment, allowing the gentle movements of water, air, and life around you to blend with your own repetitive motions. The tunic now feels pliable, the stains gradually diminishing, and your arms carry the gentle ache of productive effort, a soothing ache, the kind that signals progress without pain. As the day advances, the sun climbs higher, casting dappled patterns across the riverbank. You look around, appreciating the choreography of shared labor, women scrubbing, children splashing, elders observing or offering subtle advice. There's a comforting predictability here, yet small quirks, herbs added to wash, rhythmic tapping, whispered songs, add texture. You feel connected to a tradition that stretches back centuries, imagining countless hands shaping fabrics in the same gentle, deliberate motions. By mid-afternoon, your focus narrows entirely to the tunic in your hands, its texture, the water, the feel of natron paste, the sun warming the wet fibers. The repetitive actions lull you into a slow, steady rhythm, your thoughts quieting like sediment settling in still water. Every scrub, knead, and rinse becomes part of a meditative dance, blending effort, observation, and subtle delight in the simple miracle of clean linen. You reach for the third garment, a slightly more delicate tunic with faded embroidery along the edges. Its threads feel fragile under your fingers, and you handle it with extra care, aware that the weight of water will exaggerate every pull and stretch. You dip it slowly into the river, feeling the current tug gently at the fibers. The motion is almost hypnotic, a gentle back and forth that reminds you of rocking a cradle, and you appreciate how the simplest tasks can carry a quiet poetry. Historians still argue whether Egyptians intentionally created specific weaving patterns for longevity or if it was merely a byproduct of handcrafting. You notice an older woman a few stones away using an unusual technique. She drags her tunic across a flat reed mat before kneading. The slight friction seems to mimic a mild ironing effect, smoothing the fibers while lifting embedded dust. Curious, you try it yourself, letting the reed's texture guide the fabric under your hands. The combination of scrubbing and gentle rolling adds a subtle tactile pleasure, as if the tunic itself is responding to your attention. The scent of natron mingles with river mud, sun-baked linen, and a faint whiff of nearby cooking fires. Each inhalation is grounding, reminding you that these chores are entwined with daily life, not separate from it. A child drifts past on a tiny raft of reeds, shouting a cheerful greeting before wobbling into the shallow bank. You smile, flicking a small splash toward them, amused by the ephemeral drama of riverbank life. As you knead, you pause to examine a stubborn stain. It is dark, likely from a mixture of mud and plant juice. A local tip involves sprinkling a pinch of crushed limestone onto the spot and scrubbing gently. You try this method and notice an almost imperceptible lift of the discoloration. It makes you wonder about the trial-and-error wisdom passed down through households, often unrecorded but remarkably effective. Your hands glide rhythmically over the damp linen, and the sensation of fabric giving under pressure is oddly satisfying. You can feel each thread responding, loosening, softening, and merging with its neighbors in a slow transformation. The meditative repetition begins to quiet your mind, the river's gentle babble, the warm sun, the faint tang of natron, all combine into a soft cocoon of awareness. Nearby, a neighbor is experimenting with crushed petals in the rinse water, a whimsical addition meant to leave a subtle fragrance. You consider adding a few yourself, picturing the faint scent lingering on the tunic once dry. It's a small indulgence, almost playful, blending utility and sensory pleasure. You appreciate these tiny personal touches that make each household's laundry unique. The sun climbs higher, and the warm light penetrates the water, illuminating your submerged hands. You notice tiny air bubbles clinging to the linen, each reflecting a fleeting shimmer of sunlight. It's a subtle, almost magical effect, and you allow your eyes to linger on it, marveling at the interplay of natural elements with mundane labor. Historians still argue whether such small observations influenced daily routines or remained unnoticed pleasures of household work. A sudden gust of wind carries distant laughter, the sound drifting lazily across the riverbank. It mixes with the rhythmic tapping and kneading of other women, creating an impromptu symphony of labor. You feel connected, not just to the tunic, but to the shared experience of work, nature, and community. Every scrub and press is part of a larger, gentle pattern that stretches far beyond your immediate task. By the late morning, the tunic has softened considerably, its stains diminished, and fibers pliable. You pause to run your fingers along the embroidery, marveling at how the delicate thread survived the wash. There's a tactile satisfaction in knowing that patience and careful attention can preserve both function and beauty, even in the humblest of garments. As you move to the next task, you feel a gentle rhythm settling over you, a mix of repetitive motion, sensory engagement, and quiet observation. Each tunic becomes a small meditation, a way to connect with the ancient patterns of household life. You glance at the sunlit river, noticing how the light plays on water and stone, and realize that even in the simplest acts, there is a subtle, enduring beauty. You reach for a child-sized tunic, its tiny proportions almost comical in comparison to the adult garments you've been handling. The fabric is softer, less coarse, and feels like a whisper against your fingers. As you submerge it in the water, you notice how it floats briefly before settling, carried gently by the current. The task demands a lighter touch, a slower rhythm, almost like cradling a small animal. Historians still argue whether garments for children were considered purely practical or if they were deliberately designed to be more comfortable, reflecting early concepts of childhood care. The river is alive with movement. Small fish dart through the shallows, their scales catching flecks of sunlight, and a dragonfly hovers nearby, glinting blue and green. You notice a woman nearby humming a soft tune while scrubbing, and you find yourself unconsciously syncing your kneading motions to the rhythm. The gentle music of labor turns the mundane into something quietly melodic, and the child-sized tunic becomes almost a percussion instrument under your hands. A quirky tip surfaces from an older neighbor. She dips the small tunics in a mixture of water and crushed pomegranate seeds before washing. It is said to brighten the color and possibly repel insects. You try it experimentally, watching as the seeds swirl and stick to the wet fabric before being rinsed away. It feels whimsical, like adding a secret ingredient to an everyday ritual, and you imagine the child who will wear it smelling faintly of pomegranate, an unrecorded touch of care. The sensation of the tunic against your fingers is different from the larger garments, each scrub is more intimate, and each fold carries less resistance. You focus on the motion, feeling your hands glide over the soft fibers. There's a hypnotic quality to the repetition, a slow, gentle cadence that soothes your thoughts as much as it cleans the garment. The natural sounds of water and wind complement the rhythm, blending into a serene backdrop for your work. Nearby, a child wades into the water, splashing gently, testing the river's temperature. You smile, recalling how similar scenes must have played out countless times across Egypt's rivers, each family creating small moments of joy within daily labor. It is oddly comforting to imagine that the very next generation is learning the tactile rhythm of linen care, passing skills down through touch and observation rather than written instruction. You experiment with rolling the tunic along a smooth stone, watching how the slight pressure flattens wrinkles without tugging at the delicate fabric. Each motion is deliberate, requiring attention but providing satisfaction as the tiny garment gradually regains its intended form. You feel a subtle sense of accomplishment, a reminder that care and patience can yield tangible results even in the simplest tasks. Historians still debate whether such small innovations were standardized practices or clever household improvisations. The sun warms your shoulders, the light reflecting off the rippling water and highlighting the floating bubbles that cling briefly to wet linen. The sensory combination of cool river water on your hands, sun on your back, and soft fabric under your fingers is quietly immersive, almost meditative. You find yourself slowing your breathing to match the rhythm of your scrubbing, letting your thoughts drift gently with each movement. As you rinse the tiny tunic, a subtle scent of pomegranate lingers, faint but noticeable. It's a whimsical reminder that even the most routine tasks carry small pleasures when approached with care. You pause for a moment, observing the gentle motion of the river, the laughter of children, the distant hum of activity, and the tactile sensation of the fabric. Everything blends into a soft, continuous rhythm that soothes both body and mind. By mid-morning, the tunic is clean and pliable. You fold it carefully, noting the difference in texture compared to larger garments. Each small detail, the softness of the fabric, the faint scent, the gentle curve of tiny sleeves, reminds you that even the smallest chores carry a richness of experience. Your arms feel pleasantly tired, a gentle ache that signals both effort and satisfaction, and you sense the meditative comfort of ritual in your every movement. You glance around the riverbank, noticing the subtle choreography of work and play, children, neighbors, and yourself intertwined in quiet, purposeful motion. Each tiny tunic is a small victory, a testament to patience and attention, and the repetitive actions carry you forward in a slow, gentle rhythm that lulls the mind. You feel yourself sinking deeper into this serene cadence, content to let the motions carry both your labor and your thoughts along the gentle river flow. You pick up a more stubbornly soiled tunic, its faded linen streaked with what looks like a mixture of mud, oil, and perhaps some old fruit juice. The texture is rougher, almost resistant to your touch, demanding a little extra patience. As you submerge it into the cool river water, you notice how it sinks slower than the lighter garments, dragging your hands beneath the surface. The effort reminds you that not every task in life is gentle, yet even this challenge carries a peculiar rhythm that gradually draws you into its meditative flow. Historians still argue whether ancient Egyptians preferred soaking garments overnight or opted for brief, repeated dips for optimal cleanliness. Nearby, a woman uses a curious implement, a flattened reed bundle tied together, to scrub the tunic. She presses and twists it with rhythmic precision, lifting particles embedded deep within the fibers. You decide to try it yourself, finding that the friction is oddly satisfying, as if the fabric responds to this tactile negotiation. The tunic softens imperceptibly with each pass, and you marvel at how such simple tools can transform stubborn linen without tearing it. The river's surface shimmers under the sun, reflecting your movements in gentle, distorted waves. Birds swoop low, occasionally dipping their beaks into the water, while dragonflies hover above, their delicate wings catching the light. You pause for a moment, letting the ambient sounds mingle with your own motions. The sensory layering, water, sun, tactile feedback, and distant life, creates a quiet sanctuary where time slows, and the task ceases to feel purely mundane. You notice a faint scent of herbs drifting from another household, perhaps rosemary or thyme, added to rinse water as a subtle fragrance. Curious, you experiment with a few crushed leaves, releasing the aroma into the river as you scrub. It is a whimsical detail, almost playful, turning a simple chore into a small sensory ritual. You imagine the tunic carrying this scent for hours afterward, an invisible signature of care. The texture of the linen responds differently depending on the angle of pressure, and you adjust your hands carefully. Pressing too hard risks stretching the fabric, too light, and the grime remains. There is a delicate balance, a silent conversation between your touch and the fibers themselves. You feel each fold, each wrinkle, as if the tunic is guiding your hands, teaching a subtle skill passed down through generations. A child's laughter drifts across the water, bouncing off the sun-baked stones and mingling with the rhythmic scrubbing. You let a small splash flick toward them, a playful acknowledgement of shared space and labor. There is a soft humor in the scene, a reminder that these chores coexist with life's small joys, not apart from them. The combination of work and gentle amusement makes the rhythm of laundry feel almost like a slow, flowing dance. The stubborn stain yields slowly, requiring repeated gentle scrubbing. Each attempt brings incremental improvement, a testament to patience and care. You pause occasionally to squeeze excess water from the fabric, feeling its pliability increase with every rinse. The motion is soothing, almost hypnotic, and you realize that time seems to stretch here, each minute elongated by repetitive, mindful action. Historians still debate whether certain natural additives were used for both practical and aesthetic purposes or simply because they were readily available. As you continue, the tunic begins to regain its original form. The fibers, once clumped and rigid, now lie more smoothly, reflecting sunlight in soft, irregular patterns. You note the satisfaction of incremental progress, how small, consistent actions accumulate into visible transformation. Your breathing slows, syncing with the gentle flow of the river, the soft scrubbing, and the occasional distant call of children or birds. By late morning, the tunic is clean and supple. You fold it carefully, appreciating its texture and faint herbal scent. Even the most challenging tasks carry a quiet reward, a sense of accomplishment mixed with meditative calm. You glance at the sunlit water, noting the sparkling reflections and the subtle, ever-changing patterns on the surface. This simple, tactile labor has become a form of gentle meditation, a slow journey through time, nature, and craft. You reach for a particularly fine linen, almost translucent in the sunlight, intended for a ceremonial robe. Its delicacy demands reverent handling, and you lower it into the water with the care of someone cradling a fragile bird. The fabric responds immediately, undulating gently with the current, and you can almost feel its subtle tension beneath your fingers. Historians still argue whether these ultrafine linens were truly everyday wear for the elite or mostly reserved for religious or symbolic purposes, but either way, handling them is a lesson in patience. As you knead the waterlogged cloth, you notice the faint scratch of tiny sand grains embedded in the fibers. A fringe technique comes into play. A soft bundle of palm fibers acts like a mini brush, sweeping away particles without tearing the linen. The tactile sensation is oddly satisfying, like a quiet massage for both your hands and the fabric. Nearby, a breeze carries the earthy scent of riverbank reeds, merging with the faint aroma of freshly washed linen. You inhale deeply, letting the layered smells anchor you in the moment. You catch a glimpse of another laundress performing a whimsical trick, dipping small pieces of linen in a mix of clay and water to brighten the white. You try it experimentally, watching as the wet clay lightly coats the fibers before rinsing off. It feels playful, a subtle hint that even practical chores often had room for experimentation. Children giggle from the riverbank, occasionally tossing tiny splashes of water toward you, prompting a soft chuckle as you instinctively dodge. The sun shifts, dappled light reflecting on the rippling water, painting moving patterns across the fine linen. You press gently, observing how different angles and pressures affect the smooth surface. The motions are repetitive yet nuanced, offering a meditative cadence that lets your mind drift. Each fold and knead seems to whisper an ancient rhythm, passed through generations, from hand to hand, across centuries of daily Egyptian life. The fine linen also absorbs water differently than coarser fabrics. It becomes almost slippery in your grip, demanding a careful balance of firmness and gentleness. You notice a subtle shimmer as the sun catches the wet fibers, making the cloth seem almost alive. It's a small delight, a quiet aesthetic pleasure that reminds you labor can be beautiful even when understated. Historians still debate whether the aesthetic appeal of textiles was considered as important as their functional use, or if beauty was simply a happy byproduct. A nearby reed mat serves as a drying station. You transfer the linen onto it, smoothing out wrinkles with a gentle touch. The fabric flutters slightly in the soft river breeze, and you watch the sunlight refract through it, producing a serene, almost hypnotic dance of light. Your hands linger, tracing folds and edges, noting the texture and movement. Even mundane chores like this reveal layers of sensory richness if you slow down enough to notice them. As you rinse the cloth one final time, you observe a small water ripple catching the reflection of a distant palm tree. You pause, letting the moment settle, enjoying the subtle interplay of water, light, and fabric. The ceremonial linen now feels almost reverent in your hands, a bridge between the ordinary and the elevated. Handling it teaches patience, focus, and gentle attentiveness. Folding it carefully, you appreciate the softness and delicate sheen, savoring the quiet satisfaction of a task completed without rush. The sun warms your back, the river laps quietly at the shore, and the faint scent of linen lingers in the air. Even amidst repetitive motion, there is artistry, ritual, and a meditative calm. Small gestures, rhythmic and precise, carry you forward, lulling both body and mind in a gentle, sleepy cadence. You approach a basket brimming with dark, coarser fabrics, tunics worn daily by workers, heavy with the memory of long days and dusty streets. Their fibers are stubborn, almost stubbornly grimy, and you feel the difference immediately compared to the delicate linens you handled earlier. Submerging one into the river, you notice how the water darkens slightly, absorbing accumulated dust and oils. Historians still debate whether the darker dyes used in these garments were primarily aesthetic or had practical uses, such as hiding stains and wear. The scrubbing process here is more vigorous. You grip a short wooden paddle, its surface worn smooth by countless hands before yours, and press it against the fabric in a repetitive, rhythmic motion. Each stroke loosens grit and ingrained dirt, the sound muffled and satisfying as water bubbles and shifts around the fibers. Nearby, a young apprentice experiments by stomping gently on smaller tunics, creating an oddly playful percussion that echoes across the riverbank. You can't help but smile at the subtle humor in these methods. Ancient chores can be unexpectedly fun. While you scrub, you notice small, faint traces of pigments embedded in the cloth, remnants of dyes from other household tasks. Perhaps a merchant's apron brushed against ink, or a painter's robe had mingled pigments. You gently swirl the tunic in the water, watching the colors diffuse slowly and quietly, merging with the natural tones of the river. There's something hypnotic about the gentle mixing, a reminder that even labor carries its own aesthetic, however subtle. The tactile feedback of these coarser fabrics is very different from fine linen. They resist your grip, but the friction is oddly comforting, like exercising your hands in a slow, deliberate way. Every fold, push, and knead becomes a tiny meditative ritual. You feel the fabric's stubbornness and respond with patience, discovering a rhythm that gradually transforms effort into a quiet flow. Occasionally, you pause to observe how sunlight glints off the water and dapples the surface of the soaked tunics, adding a visual lull to your work. A curious side note emerges. Some households added natural additives like vinegar or certain herbs to these darker fabrics to maintain softness and repel pests. You sprinkle a few crushed leaves into the rinse water, releasing a faint earthy scent. The effect is minor but oddly satisfying, as if the fabric itself is participating in a shared ritual of care and sensory delight. Historians still debate the consistency of such practices, whether they were widespread or merely experimental. Children dart between the river's edges, tossing occasional splashes and giggles toward you. You react with a gentle splash in return, the momentary playfulness punctuating the steady rhythm of work. It is a reminder that chores, even repetitive and taxing ones, coexist with life's small, fleeting amusements. You notice how your body unconsciously syncs to these rhythms, the rise and fall of your arms, the gentle sway of the water, and the quiet laughter around you. After repeated cycles of scrubbing, rinsing, and gentle agitation, the tunic finally yields. Its fibers have relaxed, softened, and brightened subtly in tone, carrying a faint herbal scent. Folding it carefully, you feel the satisfaction of completing a task that required patience, persistence, and attention to detail. As the river continues its slow, constant flow, you recognize the gentle meditation inherent in such labor, the rhythm of hands, water, and nature entwined in a quiet, sleep-friendly cadence. You move to a pile of garments that seem older than the others, perhaps passed down through several family members or even gathered from the marketplace. Their fibers are uneven and frayed in places, telling subtle stories of daily life, work, and wear. You handle them carefully, aware that each tug and knead might reveal hidden textures or stubborn stains. Submerging the first piece into the water, you notice how it absorbs and releases the river's coolness differently than fresher cloth, almost as if it remembers previous baths. Historians still argue whether repeated washing softened these older fabrics deliberately or if the fraying was considered part of their character. You grab a brush made from bundled reeds, its tips fraying slightly from constant use. Each stroke lifts the accumulated dust and debris with a satisfying, whispering sound. Nearby, a small group of children experiments with floating tiny pieces of cloth on the water, making a playful game of cloth boats. Their laughter drifts to you in gentle bursts, and you find yourself smiling at the innocence intermingled with labor. Even as you scrub, there's a subtle choreography between hands, water, and fabric that feels oddly meditative. The scent of riverbank herbs, perhaps mint or coriander, mixes with the earthy aroma of wet cloth, creating a calming olfactory backdrop. You crush a few leaves and add them to your water, noticing how the aroma seems to infuse the fabric slowly, almost like a secret perfume. There's a tactile and sensory richness to these older garments, which demand patience, attention, and a gentle touch, transforming mundane scrubbing into an almost mindful ritual. You take special care with the seams and hems, where dirt often lodges stubbornly. Running your fingers along these edges, you can feel subtle bumps and grooves, each telling a small story of construction, wear, and prior washes. Pressing a reed brush gently along these lines, you discover how small motions accumulate over time into meaningful, visible results. Historians still debate whether such fine attention to detail was considered essential or merely a sign of household pride and care. As the sun climbs higher, you notice patterns forming in the wet fibers, irregular lines catching light, darker patches giving way to lighter shades. You pause for a moment, letting the slow changes register, appreciating the subtle artistry of natural wear and cleansing. There's a faint humor in observing stains fade gradually. It is neither dramatic nor instantaneous, but deeply satisfying in its quiet persistence. A few garments are unusually stubborn, retaining embedded dirt or faint pigment stains. You try an extra technique, gentle kneading combined with a circular motion of the brush. The tactile sensation is oddly soothing, a rhythmic push and pull that occupies both hands and mind, leaving you surprisingly calm. You realize that repeated effort, combined with gentle attention, carries its own reward: softened cloth, clean fibers, and a quiet satisfaction that is both tangible and mental. Finally, you lift the last piece from the water, holding it against the sun. Its fibers glisten faintly, now pliable and refreshed, carrying the faint aroma of herbs and river water. Folding each garment with deliberate care, you appreciate the meditative pace of this task. Even as repetitive labor, the rhythm of water, hands, and subtle sensory input lulls your mind into a gentle, sleepy cadence, making the ordinary extraordinary. You reach for a stack of garments dyed in muted earthy tones, ochres, deep browns, and soft greens, each color revealing a subtle story of natural pigments and household creativity. The water cools against your skin as you lower the fabrics, their fibers resisting slightly before surrendering to the gentle flow. Handling these dyed clothes requires attentiveness. Too much agitation and the color may bleed. Historians still argue whether these hues were chosen purely for aesthetics, for social signaling, or simply for practicality in hiding dirt and wear. A nearby apprentice holds a small bowl of crushed madder root, carefully sprinkling the red-orange pigment into a garment before rinsing. You watch curiously, noting the way the water absorbs the powder and tints the fibers gradually. There's a quiet satisfaction in observing the slow transformation, like watching a delicate watercolor painting emerge before your eyes. The sensory richness, the subtle scent of root, the gentle brushing of wet fibers, creates a calm, immersive experience. As you scrub, the rhythmic motion of your hands becomes hypnotic. Each push and pull sends tiny ripples across the water's surface, which catch sunlight in fleeting patterns. Occasionally, a small leaf floats past, twirling lazily, reminding you that this river is both chore space and playground for nature's subtle theater. You dip and wring, feeling the resistance of stubborn threads and the gradual softness that comes with repetition. Historians still debate how much time ancient households devoted to color care versus general cleanliness, but either way, the rhythm is consistent and soothing. The gentle aromas of herbs used in rinsing, perhaps coriander, dill, or mint, intertwine with the faintly earthy smell of wet pigments. Your fingers trace the seams and folds carefully, pressing out tiny pockets of water and smoothing the fibers. This attention to detail is both practical and meditative. Each gesture is slow, deliberate, and comforting in its repetition. You notice the difference between coarser and finer threads, adjusting pressure accordingly, discovering a subtle tactile language that has been developed over generations. Occasionally, a small streak of pigment escapes into the river, dissipating slowly like a soft blush in the current. You smile at the fleeting artistry, a tiny reminder that even chores can hold moments of ephemeral beauty. Nearby, a child attempts to float a tiny scrap dyed red, giggling when it spins in the gentle flow. You pause to watch the interaction, feeling the meditative rhythm of work extend into playful observation. Rinsing the fabrics carefully, you notice how water beads and rolls across the surface, each motion providing feedback and subtle satisfaction. The longer you linger, the more absorbed you become in the minor variations, the slight shimmer of wet fibers, the softness emerging with each knead, and the faint aroma carried by the gentle breeze. This repetitive labor lulls your mind in the same way a slow, rhythmic soundscape might, blending sensory immersion with calm focus. Finally, you lift the last garment, holding it up to the sun. Its color has deepened slightly, enriched by the careful washing and gentle rubbing. Folding it neatly, you set it aside to dry, noting how the slow, attentive motions of your hands have transformed it. There is a quiet pride in this process, a subtle satisfaction in blending patience, rhythm, and sensory awareness into a small yet meaningful accomplishment. Your hands now move toward smaller, delicate items, kerchiefs, baby wraps, and the occasional embroidered strip meant to adorn garments. Their threads are finer, almost fragile, requiring the softest touch. You lower them into the water, feeling how the fibers respond differently than coarser cloth, almost gliding beneath your fingers. Historians still debate whether these delicate pieces were treated with the same rigor as larger garments, or if they were considered more ceremonial, washed less frequently but with extra care. The washing here becomes more intricate. You alternate between gentle kneading, swirling motions, and careful brushing with a small reed tool, watching the water shift and bubble softly around each item. The motion is hypnotic, and the faint splash against the riverbank creates a lulling rhythm. Occasionally, a small embroidered pattern resists the water's flow, making you adjust your pressure. Each tug is subtle, almost like coaxing the fibers awake. There's a gentle humor in imagining how a tiny misstep could twist the embroidery into an unexpected design, though thankfully, your hands are careful. A faint scent of chamomile drifts from an herbal rinse, enveloping the items in a soothing aroma. You pause briefly to inhale, noticing how calming even minor household rituals can be. Children nearby poke sticks at floating petals and scraps, creating tiny ripples that merge with the movements of your hands. The playful background underscores the slow work, adding a subtle soundtrack of gentle activity. Historians still argue whether these rituals carried symbolic meaning beyond practicality, perhaps a gesture of care or familial pride. You fold and knead each piece, feeling the delicate texture gradually transform. Water rolls off in tiny beads, carrying away the last traces of dust, pollen, or pigment. There's a satisfying quiet in this repetitive task, an almost ASMR quality as your fingers glide over the soft, damp fibers. A stray thread catches briefly on your thumb, reminding you of the subtle challenge of working with fine textiles. Precision, patience, and attention are paramount. As you continue, you notice patterns in the way the water interacts with the items. Light refracts across tiny folds, creating faint shadows and shimmering highlights that move gently with each motion. It's a visual rhythm that mirrors the tactile one, drawing your mind into a gentle meditation. Even minor imperfections, the slight curling of a corner or a lingering water droplet, become part of the sensory story. Finally, after multiple cycles of kneading, rinsing, and gentle agitation, each delicate piece emerges refreshed, pliable, and subtly scented. Folding them carefully, you lay them aside to dry, appreciating the soft, quiet satisfaction that comes from this meticulous care. The process is slow, rhythmic, and strangely comforting, a lullaby woven from the textures, scents, and motions of daily life in an ancient household. You feel yourself sinking into a calm awareness, the gentle repetition of task and sensory engagement guiding both hands and mind towards stillness. Now, your attention turns to the outer garments, the tunics, cloaks, and heavier wraps that bear the most evidence of daily travel, errands, and labor. Their fibers are dense, slightly rough, and carry faint traces of dust, sweat, and the occasional riverbank residue. Submerging a cloak, you feel the resistance as water saturates it, slowly softening the threads. Historians still debate whether these heavier items were laundered as frequently as lighter garments, or if they were reserved for special occasions, washed only when visibly dirty or fragrant with river herbs. The rhythmic soaking and scrubbing is different here. Each push of your hands presses down into the fabric's depth, lifting embedded dirt while maintaining the integrity of the weave. You notice subtle differences. The tighter the weave, the more water hesitates before penetrating, and the more you must coax it along with careful strokes. A gentle breeze carries the earthy scent of wet linen mixed with faint traces of pollen from nearby reeds. There's a quiet amusement in imagining ancient workers wrangling similar garments, perhaps grumbling in their own gentle way, as you now do, about stubborn stains that refuse to yield. Nearby, a child tosses a small bundle of reeds into the water, creating ripples that play across the wet fabric. You pause for a moment to watch the interaction, feeling a comforting rhythm emerge from both labor and observation. You alternate between kneading, pressing, and softly scrubbing, letting your fingers explore seams, folds, and hems, as if reading the subtle history embedded in the fibers. Historians still argue whether such tactile attention was a learned household skill or more instinctual, passed down by repeated practice over generations. With the heavier garments, you sometimes employ a light beating motion against the riverbank. The soft thumps echo faintly, a sound that almost hypnotizes your mind into stillness. Water drips steadily, carrying traces of sediment and the faint herbal aroma of your rinse mixture. You notice the garments darken when wet, then gradually regain a muted hue as water settles and excess is pressed out. There's humor in the slight exaggeration of effort required. Each motion seems monumental in scale, yet the task itself remains gentle and meditative. The final cycle of wringing, smoothing, and folding transforms the heavy fabrics into pliable, refreshed items. You marvel at the subtle sheen, the way the threads relax and regain their soft resilience, and the faint herbal fragrance that lingers. The task, repetitive yet mindful, evokes a deep calm, a soothing cadence that blends the physical rhythm of washing with the mental ease of observation and care. Each garment, now clean and lightly perfumed, sits patiently to dry, a testament to patience, rhythm, and gentle attention. You feel a slow, comforting exhaustion in your arms, a satisfaction in having guided each fiber through its watery journey with care and subtle ceremony. At last, you turn your hands toward the final touches, the hanging, drying, and gentle airing of all the washed garments. You step to the riverbank, feeling the soft mud yielding under your feet, and drape each item carefully over wooden poles or rocks, letting gravity stretch out the fibers. The sunlight filters through leaves, scattering dappled patterns across the cloth, highlighting subtle textures and occasional embroidery you might have overlooked earlier. Historians still argue whether drying was done mainly outdoors for sunlight and airflow, or indoors to maintain privacy and protect delicate colors. You pause to adjust a cloak that flutters in the breeze, watching the slow dance of fabric and light. The gentle rustle becomes part of a broader symphony, water dripping from seams, leaves brushing the river's surface, distant chatter from children playing along the bank. Even small, seemingly mundane gestures, smoothing a crease, shaking out a stubborn fold, repositioning a garment for better exposure, become meditative. There's a quiet humor in the subtle theatrics of each piece catching the wind, as if performing a tiny, improvised dance. Nearby, a child hums an improvised tune while balancing on a low stone, occasionally glancing at your work. The combination of minor sounds, the soft plop of water, the swish of cloth, and faint singing, creates a calming, ASMR-like backdrop. You notice the aromas of dried herbs lingering faintly, mingling with the earthy scent of sun-warmed mud and the subtle sweetness of nearby flowers. It's remarkable how such simple natural elements elevate the routine task into a multisensory experience. As you hang each garment, you reflect on the rhythms that carried you here, the kneading, rinsing, and careful attention to every fold and seam. Even minor imperfections, slight water streaks, uneven drying, or a stubborn crease, become part of the story, small reminders of the tactile, human element in everyday ancient life. You take satisfaction in completing the cycle, observing how each fiber has been treated with care and attention, emerging refreshed, pliable, and subtly scented from a river, herbs, and patient hands. Finally, as the last cloth settles into place, you step back and take in the gentle panorama, rows of fabric swaying slowly in the breeze, sunlight glinting on wet patches, and the soft hum of life around you. There's a profound stillness here, the culmination of hours of careful labor, observation, and quiet meditation. The repetitive motions, sensory immersion, and calm focus throughout this laundry routine have gradually drawn your mind and body into a relaxed state. The river, the fabrics, and the surrounding life merge into a gentle lullaby of daily existence, encouraging your eyes to flutter closed, your mind to ease, and your thoughts to settle like fine sediment in a slow-moving stream. Now, with all the garments washed and hung, you let your hands rest, feeling the residual dampness evaporate slowly into the warm, quiet air. The river continues its soft murmur, a gentle accompaniment to your steady, calm breathing. You notice the subtle warmth of the sun on your shoulders and the occasional brush of a light breeze against your face. Each sensory detail, the faint aroma of herbs, the soft rustle of drying fabric, the glint of sunlight across the water, encourages a deep, almost imperceptible relaxation to settle across your body. Your mind drifts to the rhythm of the day, tracing the repetitive motions of washing and drying, the gentle kneading of fibers, and the careful attention to patterns, folds, and colors. There is no rush here, no urgency, only a slow, soothing cadence that has carried you from one moment to the next. You might recall the playful child balancing on the stone, the way a stray leaf twirled on the river, or the faint sheen on a freshly washed cloak. Each image blends seamlessly, forming a tranquil mental landscape in which you can rest. As you take a final, deep breath, you let yourself linger in the calm sensation of accomplishment and quiet observation. The world around you, rivers, garments, trees, and distant life, continues gently, without interruption. There is comfort in the continuity, in the small, rhythmic cycles of care that connect you to countless hands and households before. Let the gentle sway of cloth, the soft ambient sounds, and the subtle scent of herbs guide your mind toward stillness, letting thoughts drift slowly and pleasantly. Now, as you feel your body sink into calm awareness, allow your muscles to relax, your eyes to close, and the soothing repetition of daily life in an ancient household to lull you into a gentle, restorative rest.